Wow. Get this, something like 75% of companies, they say that a bad hire, especially in a key sales role, like really hits their revenue.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, it's not just about, you know, filling a position. It's got to be the right person, someone who can really drive sales and help the company grow.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually what we're diving into today, right? We're
Hmm.
looking at sales recruiting, but specifically the contingency model. Now, I think a lot of people listening, they've probably at least heard of contingency recruiting. No upfront fees. Sounds pretty good. But the question is it really the best way to go when you're looking for top sales talent?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? At first glance, it might seem like a pretty cost-effective way to go, but when you really dig in, the sales experts suggest that it might not be the best deal, especially for those really important sales roles.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about when we say contingency recruiting, and why are the sales experts, maybe not so thrilled about it?
Okay, so with contingency recruiting, the recruiter only gets paid if the candidate they recommend ends up getting hired. So it's kind of like a no-win, no-fee deal.
So it seems like it's pretty low risk for the company, at least on the surface.
Yeah, you got it. But the thing is, this payment structure, well, it can kind of incentivize recruiters in a way that might not be the best for you as a hiring manager.
Okay, so what are some of those potential downsides? What are the sales experts warning about?
Well, one of the big things is this focus on quantity over quality. You see, because contingency recruiters are basically working on commission, they're often trying to, push through as many candidates as possible just to increase their chances of getting someone placed and getting paid.
So instead of really taking the time to, carefully vet the candidates and make sure it's a good fit for the company, they just flood you with resumes and hope something sticks.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That can actually end up costing you more time and money in the long run because you're just wading through a pile of unqualified people.
And it's not just the time it takes to, look at all those resumes, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's also the cost of a bad hire. We talked about that at the beginning of our deep dive.
Oh, absolutely. The sales experts, well, they actually found that companies that lean heavily on contingency recruiting, they tend to see higher turnover rates in their sales team.
Yeah, makes sense if you're not bringing in the right people in the first place.
For sure. And then there's another thing, the whole commitment issue. Because these contingency recruiters are often juggling multiple clients and job openings at the same time, they might not be as dedicated to finding the perfect fit for your specific needs.
It's like they're spread too thin, trying to do too much at once instead of really understanding what makes a company and this specific role so unique.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And, when they don't have that deep understanding, well, then you end up with mismatches. The candidate might look good on paper, but their skills and experience don't really line up with what the role actually requires.
Oh, I've seen that happen. They look great, you get them in there, and it's like, oh, this is not the right personality. They just don't fit in with the company culture.
And that can really be a problem. It can hurt sales performance and even bring down team morale.
Yeah, no doubt.
I know.
So it sounds like the sales experts are, well, they're raising some really valid points here about contingency recruiting, especially for those big, high-impact sales roles. But is there ever a time when maybe contingency recruiting makes sense?
There are times when it might be a decent option. The sales experts acknowledge that. For example, if you're hiring for an entry-level sales position and you need a lot of people, high volume, and the skills and experience are pretty straightforward, in those cases, a contingency recruiter could be a decent way to fill those roles pretty quickly.
So it's really about understanding, I guess, the strengths and weaknesses of each recruiting model, figuring out which one really lines up with what you need and the type of position you're trying to fill.
You got it. It's not one size fits all. You really got to weigh those pros and cons, think about what the impact is going to be down the road.
That's great advice. So we've talked about some of the things to watch out for with contingency recruiting, but what about the alternative? What did the sales experts say about the retained recruiting model?
Now that's where it gets really interesting. With retained recruiting, you're basically partnering with a dedicated expert, someone who's totally focused on finding the very best candidate for your company.
So it's not just about filling the job as fast as possible. It's more about finding the right person who's going to be there for the long haul.
Exactly. And the sales experts, they suggest that for those crucial sales roles where the right hire can make or break your bottom line, well, that long-term perspective can be really, really valuable.
Okay, so let's dive into that then. Let's explore this world of retained recruiting and why the sales experts think it could be a real game changer when it comes to building a top-notch sales team.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it. Let's unpack what makes retained recruiting so different and why it might be something you want to consider for your next big sales hire. It's not just about hiring some headhunter. You're bringing in a real partner, someone who's really invested in your success, especially in
So
sales.
it's much more collaborative then.
Right.
Like the recruiter almost becomes part of your team.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of close relationship, well, it comes with some serious perks. For instance, retained recruiters, they usually only work with one client at a time for a specific role.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
mean, that way they can really focus their energy, really get to know the company culture, what the ideal candidate looks like, and even the ins and outs of your sales process.
Right. It's not just about, skimming resumes and sending them out to anyone who might be a semi-decent fit. It's about really carefully picking out those top-tier candidates, the ones who not only look good on paper, but really fit in with the company's values and long-term goals.
So they're kind of like talent scouts then, going out and finding those hidden gems, the people who might not even be actively looking for a new job.
Exactly. And that's one of the best things about retained recruiting. They have the connections, they know the industry, and they have the time to actually reach out to those passive candidates. And those are the folks who can really make a difference in a sales organization.
The sales experts, they mentioned this study, I thought it was really interesting, that said over 60% of top-performing salespeople, they're not even looking for a new job.
Mm.
So if you're just, relying on job boards and applications, you're missing out on a huge pool of talent.
Yeah, that's true. Retained recruiters can tap into that hidden market because they've spent time building relationships with these top performers. They understand what makes them tick, what they want in their career, and how to sell your opportunity and make it sound really appealing.
It's like having a secret weapon in the whole war for talent.
You could say that.
Hmm.
And because they're only working with a handful of clients, they can also provide a much more personalized service.
So it's not just, here's a stack of resumes, good luck.
Mm.
It's more like, here are the right resumes. And they're there to walk you through the whole process, from screening candidates to those final interviews.
Exactly. They can help you come up with a targeted recruiting strategy, write those job descriptions that really grab people's attention, do in-depth assessments of the candidates, and even provide some coaching and support to make sure the onboarding process goes smoothly.
That sounds a lot more strategic and comprehensive than just throwing resumes at the wall and seeing what sticks.
It is. And while that upfront investment in a retained recruiter might seem like a lot compared to the contingency model, the sales experts, they argue that it usually pays off in the long run.
Because as we said earlier, a bad hire can really cost you, not just in terms of lost productivity and revenue, but it can also damage team morale and the whole company culture.
Exactly. So when you factor in all those hidden costs, the retained model starts to make a lot more sense, especially for those super important sales roles where the stakes are high.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to take that long-term view and realize that investing in the right people up front, well, it can lead to bigger wins in sales and help your company grow in a sustainable way.
Right, and it's not just about the money. There's also that peace of mind that comes with knowing you've got a trusted partner who's there to help you build a winning sales team.
That's a really good point. So it sounds like the sales experts are definitely leaning towards the retained recruiting model,
Mhm.
especially for those key sales roles that can make a huge difference to your bottom line. But how do you know if retained recruiting is the right choice for your company?
That's a good question. And honestly, it depends on a bunch of different things. Like how senior is the role you're trying to fill? How quickly do you need to hire someone? The size of your company, and of course, your budget.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
No, not really. But there are some questions you can ask yourself to figure out if retained recruiting might be a good fit.
Okay, like what?
Well, first off, think about how much impact this role is going to have on your revenue goals. If you're hiring a sales leader who's going to be in charge of driving a big chunk of your sales well, then investing in a retained recruiter might be a smart move.
Because if you get the wrong person in that kind of role, the cost could be massive.
Right. And if you're in a really competitive industry where it's tough to find good sales talent, a retained recruiter can give you a big edge.
Because they have the connections and the know-how to find those passive candidates, the ones who you might not even know exist.
Exactly. And if you're looking for a partner who can help you build a talent pipeline that's sustainable, well, then a retained recruiter can be a valuable asset.
Because they're not just focused on this one hire, They're thinking about your future needs and building relationships with potential candidates.
Exactly. And they can give you some really valuable insights into industry trends. You know what the going rate is for salaries and the best ways to attract and keep top sales talent.
So it's more than just filling a job. It's about having a strategic partner who can help you build a world-class sales organization.
You got it. And that's really what retained recruiting is all about. It's not just finding a salesperson, it's finding the right one, someone who can really move the needle and help your company succeed.
I like that. So if you're leading a sales team or hiring for a sales role, or even if you're an executive who's looking to build a high-performing sales team, it's definitely worth checking out retained recruiting.
It might not be the right fit for every situation, but for those really crucial sales roles where a lot is riding on the line, it can be a game changer.
Okay, so we've explored all the good stuff about retained recruiting, but let's be real, it's not always perfect.
Yeah.
What are some of the downsides or the challenges that companies might run into with the retained model?
Well, one of the big things that companies worry about is the cost. Retained recruiters usually charge a retainer fee upfront, and that can be a big chunk of change, especially for smaller companies or those with tight budgets.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a different way of paying compared to contingency recruiting, where you only pay if the recruiter actually finds someone.
True, but you have to remember that retainer fee isn't just a payment for the work they do, it's an investment in a partnership.
So you're paying for their time, their expertise, and their commitment to finding the absolute best candidate for your company.
Right. And that investment can actually save you money down the road because it lowers the risk of making a bad hire and it can speed up the whole hiring process.
Makes sense. So it's about looking at the big picture and weighing those upfront costs against the potential benefits in the long run.
Exactly. And another potential challenge with retained recruiting is the trust factor. You're essentially putting a very important part of your hiring process in the hands of someone outside your company.
So you really need to do your research and find a retained recruiter who's got a good track record of success in your industry and who you know shares your values and your commitment to finding the right fit.
Absolutely. You need to feel confident that they get your business, your culture, and what you need. And you need to be able to talk to them openly and honestly throughout the entire process.
Just like any partnership, really, communication and trust are essential.
Exactly. And if you can find that right retained recruiter, someone you feel good about working with, it can be a really amazing experience for your company and your whole sales team.
So it sounds like retained recruiting can be a really powerful tool for putting together a winning sales team, but it's not without its hiccups.
That's right. It's important to think about the pros and cons and make sure it's the right move for your specific needs and situation.
But if you're looking for a strategic partner, someone who can help you find the best sales talent out there, retained recruiting is definitely worth a look.
For sure, it can be a real difference maker for companies that are serious about crushing it in sales.
Great insights. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into sales recruiting, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. What are some of the key takeaways our listeners should keep in mind as they navigate this whole crazy world of finding and hiring great sales talent?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to remember that sales recruiting isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
There's no secret formula or magic bullet that's going to guarantee you find the perfect person every single time.
You got it. It's about understanding how each recruiting model works, weighing the good and the bad, and choosing the approach that makes sense for your needs, your budget, and the type of role you're trying to fill.
So do your homework and make an informed decision.
Exactly. And another important thing to remember is that sales recruiting is an ongoing process.
It's not something you do once and then you're done.
Nope. You got to constantly be building those relationships with potential candidates, building a strong employer brand, and staying up to date on all the latest trends and best practices in the industry.
So you're always working on building that pipeline of talent to fuel your company's growth.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, sales recruiting is really all about finding the right people.
People who are not only talented and have the experience you need, but who also share your company's values and are really passionate about what you do.
Because when you find those people, the ones who are genuinely invested in your success, well, that's when the real magic happens.
That's how you build a sales team that's firing on all cylinders and can take your business to the next level.
You got it. So don't settle for average. Keep looking for those exceptional people who can really make a difference.
They're out there somewhere just waiting for the right opportunity to shine.
And when you find them, don't let them go. Invest in them, help them grow, and watch your sales go through the roof.
Great advice. So there you have it, folks, a deep dive into the world of sales recruiting with insights straight from the sales experts.
We looked at the ups and downs of contingency and retained recruiting, and we talked about how important it is to find the right fit for your company's specific needs.
Now it's your turn. Take a good look at your current recruiting strategy. Think about what we've talked about today and make those changes you need to build a sales team that's unstoppable.
Remember, your success in sales, it all starts with having the right people. So go out there and find them.
And don't be afraid to invest in the resources and the expertise you need to make it happen.
Because in the end, finding those A players is worth every penny.
That's right. This has been a really insightful look at the world of sales recruiting. We hope the research from the sales experts has given you some things to think about as you build your next winning team. Remember, the right people are out there. Now go find them. So we've talked a lot about these different approaches, but what does it actually mean for someone who's trying to, build their sales team or grow it? What are the takeaways here? It sounds like the sales experts are saying it's not about finding the cheapest option when it comes to contingency versus retained.
Right, you got it. It's about understanding what you're really paying for. What's it worth to you to find that top performer? The one who's not just going to hit their numbers, but who's going to raise the bar for everyone.
It's that difference maker, right? The one who doesn't just bring in more revenue, but who changes how the whole company operates.
Exactly. And those people are out there, but they're probably not, just sitting around on job boards. They're getting headhunted all the time. They're happy where they are, and they're only going to move for something really special.
And that's where the sales experts are saying that upfront investment in a retained recruiter can really pay off. They're the ones who have those connections, who really understand the market. They can find those people who you might not even know exist.
It's like, think about it this way. If you were trying to win a championship, would you just go with a bunch of average players because they're, easy on the budget? Or would you try to get a couple of those superstar athletes, the ones who can really make a difference?
Yeah, it's the same idea when you're building a sales team. You're not just trying to fill spots. You're trying to build something great. And sometimes that means investing in the right people.
Right, exactly. And the sales experts actually told this story about a company that was really hesitant about paying a retained recruiter. They thought they could just do it themselves. But then, a year later, after a bunch of bad hires and lost revenue, they went back to that same recruiter and they were more than happy to pay that fee.
It's that classic penny wise, pound foolish thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes trying to save a little money up front can cost you way more in the end.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the thing is, that initial cost of a retained recruiter, well, it can actually save you money in other ways. You're getting a more efficient process, you're getting better candidates, and you've got an expert guiding you the whole way.
It's like trying to get through a maze.
Yeah.
Right? You can try to do it on your own, or you can have someone who knows exactly where they're going.
And having that guide can make all the difference in how quickly and easily you get to where you want to be.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, if you're thinking about making your next sales hire, ask yourself, what's it really going to cost me if I don't get the best possible person? What's that going to do to my team, to my customers, and to my bottom line?
Because thinking about that might make you reconsider your whole approach to recruiting.
The sales experts are basically saying that sometimes paying for a retained recruiter, it's not an expense, it's an investment in your long-term success.
And in the world of sales, where every deal counts, that's an investment that can really make a difference.
This has been a great deep dive into sales recruiting. We hope all the research from the sales experts has given you some things to think about as you build your team. Remember, the right people are out there. Now go find them.